and host of the podcast, Age Out, Rise Up. We've asked Carob to join us today to share her passion about Age Out, Rise Up. But before we do that, we're going to hear her story about an incident. Welcome to the show, Carob.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. All right, so about 3 weeks ago, you encountered something that sadly has been happening around our community since the summer. And so would you mind sharing your firsthand account?
Sure. My husband was running for a small office, and part of what you do when you're doing that is hold the signs out on the street corners.
Done that many times.
Yeah. And I had a specific sign. Okay, so I wasn't sharing my husband's support sign. I had my own sign, and it had Martin Luther King's face, and on the bottom said "Character Matters," and then it did say "Reject BLM." And so those are just some, that's.
So I feel like you, like me, as a woman of color, you really care about the Black community.
Yes.
You really care about how race is affecting the Black community. And so if I were in your place, I'm going out to hold a sign like that in order to encourage and to open up conversation. So what happened when you were out there? What was your experience?
Sure. Well, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's not just for me about feeling about just Black people or just white people. I am a biracial woman.
Yes.
And I feel like that gives me the ability to, they say colorblind or whatever. I'm not colorblind. I'm not going to pretend I'm colorblind. I can see every single person. I know that there's a redheaded here, blonde-haired here, and, brunette here. But, this particular movement, this particular conversation, the narrative that people are saying is, I think, damaging to every single person.
I would agree with that.
And teaching our kids to be victims is something that I'm adamantly against. Like my whole platform, Age Out, Rise Up, is about rising and moving ahead, not staying in this kind of, place of rage.
Yes.
And being labeled, right?
Right.
Whenever we label someone else is being left out.
Right.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and even the victim status.
Yeah.
You know, I had a very difficult childhood. My mother, for part of my childhood, was on welfare, single mom. And when she finally got a job, no car, walked to work, even in the winter time. Life was not easy for me, but I had a choice.
Right.
I could be a victim, or I could do something with my life, and I chose the latter. And I can see that that is what you are about too. This Age Up, Rise Out, which we'll get to later, is all about not ending where you started, right?
Right, absolutely.
And we know that well. We know how important that was. So what happened on the day that you were out waving your sign?
Sure. So I started off with holding out my sign with this big group of people, and you do it for about 2 hours. During that time, some people will honk. It's kind of funny because they assume, looking at me, that I must be holding BLM. So the people that will honk at all of the political people are like, "Oh, but not you!" And I'm like, "It's okay, Martin Luther King, character matters, right?"
Yeah.
And I would get some people, especially some, it's so weird to me, but some women in their, like, I don't know, I'll be generous and say mid to late 40s. That's probably more like their 50s, right?
Yeah.
They were just like militant women. And I would have some of them who would like write down, like this one woman, she wrote down, like she had a notebook in the front of her car with a Sharpie, and she wrote down, "Black Lives Matter," and she's shoving it through the window at me. And I'm just like, really? Because I'm like, I feel like I have more of a place to talk about this particular subject. Believe it or not, I actually care about Black lives because
Right.
here.
You'd be crazy not to. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, which happens a lot in these things, are that the Antifa kids, and they are children, which is actually extremely sad. They're maybe, between 17 and 20 something, okay? They come out there just ready to crash whatever event. We've had things like urine thrown on us. Somebody had bleach thrown on them, and there's like on their sweater, there's holes from the bleach that was thrown on them. My son has been standing out there, and he's been just berated, and he's 12.
Oh, okay, I was
he's
going to ask you how
12
old
years
he was.
old, you know.
You see, there is no boundary, no respect whether
No.
whether a person is old or young
Right.
or in between.
Well, and I had that conversation because, like, my background is being a youth group leader, and so I don't talk to these people. I'm not all like trashy and in their face. I'm just like, so let's have a conversation. What's kind of scary is that they all respond the exact same way, to the point that you can't. There's no other way to say it except that they're like indoctrinated.
Yes.
Because they.
You know, I've used that word quite a bit with what's going on.
Yeah, and so they're like they'll walk up to you and I'll say, "Hi, welcome," and they'll say, "I can see I can't change your mind, so I'm not going to engage." And I mean, they're just full on, like, nothing, blank faces, whatever, and I won't let them get away with it. So, and I've actually had like 3 of these situations, and I won't let them get away with it. And I'll say, "Why do you think you can't change my mind?" I mean, I think the whole point, if you're out here, you're passionate about something, so you should bring your ideas, and
Yes.
maybe if we listen to each other, you know, we can get these ideas. And I had one person this day. First these 2 girls came at me and they said filthy things. I mean, just, and I was like, don't you believe in, like,
Now,
having
how old
respect?
were these 2 girls, approximately?
18, between 18 and 20.
Now, were they young women of color?
No,
Okay.
they weren't. One of them, I'm trying to put this in the most appropriate way, one of them seemed to claim that she was of, you know, they believe that gender is fluid. And
Okay.
so she was saying things that would make you think that she was male.
Okay. I get the picture.
So, yeah. I'm, like, trying to be. And,
Thank you for being gracious on the
yes, refined.
show. Yeah. Thank you for being refined.
And so she was just yelling and screaming, and at one point she literally said, "I'm a witch and I'm gonna curse you." And it was just like, okay, well, you believe what you're gonna believe. You know, and so this one girl, she listened to me because there were younger people there, and they told her to listen to me. They
So
were
it's
conservative.
interesting. Let me
Yeah.
add something there. It's an interesting thing to me. When I was a young woman, I dared not speak to adults the way I see some of these kids
Right.
speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that they don't listen to the adults, but they will listen to a peer.
Yes. Yes. And so
That has
these other
definitely
kids-
changed in the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I asked them that. I said, so you don't have any respect for your elders? I'm like, so when you first come out, they're like, you need to stay 10 feet away from me because I'm in quarantine. But as soon as you say something, even like this, you know, they get to your face like this.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what about quarantine? You know, it wrapped up. You know, she walked off her way, it wrapped up. Well, so then I was going to my car, and I see this, just out of the corner of my eye, there's a girl. She looks quite a bit like me.
Okay. So seeing that, you probably thought, oh, hey.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a conversation, a pleasant conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Well, so first I'm just walking to my car with a friend, because they always tell you to walk with another person.
Yes.
You know, and this is literally the middle of the day. This is 2:00 in the afternoon.
Okay, right, okay. So it's not in the evening, it's not in the, yeah.
No, 2:00 on a
It's
Saturday.
really telling that
It's a
in
Saturday.
the United States, that has to be a conversation. And it wasn't like you were in a dangerous place. You see.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm like right between Bartell's and the bank.
Right.
Like
Yes.
the shopping center.
Right.
It was pretty crazy. So my friend leaves, I say goodbye, I see another sign, and my husband's out there, so I'm gonna tell him, okay, I'm leaving. So I see her, and she's starting to get out of her car. Now, I have a thing that I try to do whenever I see just an individual person of color on their own these days, and that is, I try to look at them in the eye and just, you know, keep smiling, and character matters, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right,
character.
right, yes.
Like, don't let them take that from you.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I was about to do.
It's
She
like-
jumped out of her car, she
Wow.
charged me, and she goes, "I will not allow you to spread your hate." And I'm like, what? I'm like shocked, because this girl could be my daughter. I mean,
Right.
curly hair, brown eyes, glasses, everything, you know? And I'm shocked. And I'm like, what are you talking about, hate? And she's trying to grab my sign. And I said, look at my sign. It has Martin Luther King on it.
Right.
We're being pawns. We're being you. And she just punches me in the throat.
She punched
me in the throat. So then I'm still trying to grab my thing from her. And she, like, leans back. And I'm still trying to talk to her. And in my head, okay, we're between two cars. I'm thinking, well, I could bang her head against the car and get away. But then I'm also thinking, she's a kid.
Right,
I don't want to do this to a kid.
This is the difference between someone who is loving and kind.
And mature.
Yes. And you're thinking, I don't want to hurt someone's child. But this child, these kids these days are doing great harm when they disagree, when they don't like what you have to say. And this is what happened. You were assaulted because of that.
Well, I'm sitting there going, you don't like my hate, but you won't have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
And you're attacking me full of rage and hate.
So she punches you and tries to grab your sign. And
yeah, and so we're fighting, and it looks pathetic because my idea of a workout is watching one on TV. and so we're like,
oh my goodness. And this is in the parking lot?
Yeah. And so when she kicks me, the second time, she punched me and she kicks me. Yes, she kicks me in the privates. And
wait,
yes,
she kicked you in the private.
The lady part.
The lady part.
Okay, so I'm wondering what's happening to our young women.
Wow.
What's happening to our young women when they are just brutal?
Yeah, they don't know that, and that's the thing. So, like, let me rewind a little bit. When I'm talking to these people, like, I will ask them, why don't you bring conversation to the table? Your behavior, you say that you're anti-fascist. Do you know what fascism is?
Right.
Do you know that your behavior is just like the brown shirts of Germany?
Yeah.
Just like it, word for word, textbook. Mm-hmm. The reality is that you shut down media that doesn't, agree with you. You burn down buildings, and you silence anyone who has a different opinion.
See, it's just like racism right now. And Jen and I talked about this on the first segment, I believe, on the racism series that we're doing. The definitions have been switched.
Right.
Yes.
Reasonable people have an idea of what these things mean. But these children and the ones who are pouring into them or indoctrinating them. Yes. And suddenly it's a switch from the reality to an emotional thing. Now you're a fascist because I don't like you, because you happen to stand for something that is not what I stand for, and therefore you don't get to talk.
The sad thing is that they're not really standing for anything.
Yes, exactly.
Like they
are
they
believe
principles.
that they are.
Well, and I think it really shows how the youth are being used.
Yes.
And indoctrinated, brainwashed, if you will, because a healthy society, we should be able to talk about anything and disagree, and do so in a mature way. We could disagree about everything, but we can still be kind and respectful to each other. So when those
and that's
norms,
what you do when you are healthy, and you have a foundation. And it seems to me today that these children, and I call them children because my oldest is 38 years old, so I can call a 30-year-old a child. But these children are running around on America's streets doing great damage and great harm to business, to industry, to people. And they have absolutely no conscience about it because elected officials have not held them accountable either. It's almost like it's like they're being used for a cause that they don't know anything about.
I don't know about the not having any conscience about it, because I do feel like I've gone home, especially when it first happened, and I would go to bed at night and I would be angry and I would rethink when I was sleeping, I would dream about the violence I could have caused, and then I would wake up and I would pray, and I would pray to not have those feelings myself, but I also would pray for the kid, because guess what? How they act in a mob isn't necessarily how they feel when they're at home on their own. They've got to have something.
That's true, but there are some, I believe, that are just truly hardened. They've been in this. I mean, when you think about what happened in Portland and how they stayed there for months, what was it?
I think they're still there.
And so when you look at that, that's going away at night and coming back again. It's one thing to have an encounter with you, a young person attacks you. I'm gonna guess when you sit back and you think, wow, I probably shouldn't have done that in that moment. But some of these groups in these large collections of people,
Right.
these are the ones that I say, they do not appear to have a conscience for what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's just
Well, you know,
sad.
I think it just shows when you are lost and you don't have a plumb line to follow.
Yes.
You don't have something that brings you hope, because
Yes.
Right.
under the guise of like this utopian
Yes.
society that we are supposed to have, which God never promises, right? Jesus never promises
Right.
that. We are really, our youth are being duped and
Right.
they're being deceived by
Yes.
the enemy.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing it play out in our society right now. And what I think disturbs me the most is we see adults not mentoring these children.
Yes.
Right? And they
Well,
are
we see
children.
them mentoring them the opposite way,
Yeah.
right?
And some
and-
of them, unfortunately, are their parents.
Right.
And that's even more tragic. That's
Yeah.
tragedy on a different level.
It really is. And there is something about, I love what you mentioned about like the respect of the elders, because that is something I grew up with.
Right.
And there is a reason for that. And we talked about it earlier today about He's a God of order. He's not a God of chaos.
Yeah.
And when we follow that and we follow under His authority, things work well for us. It's not perfect, but that is what this kind of society that we want, right?
Right.
And so when I hear stories like you saying that the young lady punched you in the throat, I mean, oh my goodness, she should be in jail, right? There should be, the policeman should have arrested her.
Right.
But this kind of behavior is going on and on without any consequences. And so what are we teaching our youth?
Well, and
Right.
or what happens is they get away with it for so long, and nobody does anything, and then all of a sudden they're rounded up. It's like
Right. Yeah.
we have to set boundaries and hold kids accountable. So go ahead.
The problem with that is that so much of the new kind of Marxist culture and the things that they're teaching are that, you know, being held accountable is whiteness.
Yes.
You know, all
I
of these
know.
things that you just are like common sense. I mean, and
It's really used to shut people up.
right.
It's really used to stop dialogue.
Right.
And I think what needs to happen, and I feel hopeful, is that, you know, if someone was to call me a racist, I'd be, it's not true.
right.
Like, no, I will not allow you to call me something that my Father in heaven does not call me.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think we need to be standing up and speaking out and sharing the truth in love. And also, I love what you said about how you said you lay in bed, you're angry, you pray to the Lord, and then you pray for the people that are
Yeah.
enemies. And God calls us to pray for our enemies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I like what you said because like the Christians that are really struggling with BLM and how they can be Christian when, you know, when they're eating all of that stuff, and I'm just
Yeah,
like,
we've talked about
I'm
that
like-
at great length.
yeah, I just sit there going, you're a new creation.
Right.
Yes.
That's all there is to it. Like there's
Yeah,
there's
that's right.
nothing else to it. You're a new creation. All of your sins are washed away.
That's right.
So all of the sins that they will not pile on you,
Yes.
especially this generation of people who haven't experienced
Yes.
anything.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, you mentioned that being held accountable is whiteness. So that interesting list that comes off of was ludicrous to me. It was all of these things that go to be a productive life that they were saying being white was being white.
Absolutely.
So what are they saying to people like us? What are we saying to young black children, young black adults, that you are not supposed to be a decent person?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's decency. It has no color on it. Those are morals and principles that have absolutely no color. I don't care who teaches them to my children. Thank you. You can be
Right.
black, Chinese, or white, or Iranian. I really don't
Right.
care. If you add something of good moral excellence to the lives of my children, thank you, is
Yeah.
what I say.
Absolutely.
It absolutely appalled me to see that list.
Yeah, me too.
But did you also notice there was nothing beside it? It's almost like they say they want to tear down all of this whiteness, but then when you say, what is it that you want to replace it with? Then they tell you, well, we'll figure that out after.
They have no solutions.
It's like, absolutely not. You will not teach this garbage to my children
Yeah.
and have me silent. You will not teach it to my grandchildren. And if I have anything to say about it, you will not teach it to my neighbor's children.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
No, I just pulled my son out of school for this very reason. The thing that Ronald Reagan called it the bigotry of low expectations.
Yes.
And that is
My
what
dad
a
didn't
slap
allow
in the
that
face.
in my house.
You know, and so many black
when you
families
say-
don't.
Yes.
You know,
Do you think it's because when you have your identity in Christ and you know who
Yeah.
you are, you're not going to fall for that,
Yeah.
right?
well, I think that
Do you
lot
think it's
of
a
people have
reflection of our society?
yeah, I think
just-
that a lot of people have a lukewarm. I'm sorry, I'm
Faith.
really blunt, and I think
Yeah.
that a lot of people have a very lukewarm faith, and
Oh,
they're
you
easily
will not get. You won't get any pushback here.
easily to be
Fine
tossed
podcast.
back and
We're
forth.
all about real faith here.
You don't get to say that my experience isn't valid unless it falls into your narrative.
But see, this is what's happening. This is what's happening with the whole woke
Yes.
idea, you know. And for those who would like to be woke, they need to do that on their time. I don't
Absolutely.
want woke in my schools.
Yeah.
You know, we have schools, and we're going to talk about this in segment 4. We have entire schools that are turning into social justice machines.
Absolutely.
Where they are not holding a high standard for black students. And if they do not hold a standard for black students that is high enough, then the expectations that are already low will be nothing. You know, and I believe that they are also causing fear in black students. For instance, if you have a community like the one that we live in. Now, my son, I have 2 boys. The 38-year-old, when he moved here with me, he was going into 9th grade. And I believe he was one of 2 black kids at that high school. Now, he walked the streets just like any other high school kid, came home really late at night, sometimes late for curfew, was seen by police, was never accosted, okay? Now, to tell a young man like him when he's at school that, or even suggest that he could be in danger of police just from walking on the streets is absolutely wrong. Why would you instill fear into a child who doesn't have to fear?
Absolutely.
And that's what's going on. It's cruel. It is sinful if you're a Christian and you're doing it, and it is immoral.
My son, he looks like a leprechaun. He is pale white and freckles and red hair, okay? But he's smart.
Yes.
And he's sitting there and he's, so I'm supposed to go to one class and hear how I am the oppressor because they will put him in the Caucasian classroom, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, but yet my mom is like the only black woman in this part of where we live. And he's like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
You know, and he's smart and he sees that stuff. But he has friends who absolutely, you know, like I've had people come up to me and say, how are you doing with all of this? And when I tell them how I feel, they don't care.
They don't want to hear it.
They only want to hear
Interesting.
one thing. Oh, I'm having such a hard time.
But you know what the sad thing is, this is not isolated to our public schools.
No.
My daughter was a senior in college when all of this was unfolding, and she was at a Christian university in a sociology class when the professor actually said he understands all of this oppression, and she calls on my daughter who raised and says, excuse me, but my mom didn't raise me like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not oppressed. I have never been oppressed. I lived in a very nice community and went to a school that was very safe. No one has ever harassed me or my brothers. And the professor actually had the audacity to tell her, you probably don't realize it because you suppress it. But see, she went to the wrong student with that, because of course my daughter says that's not the experience of every black person or every biracial person. And for the rest of the term, when they were having these conversations about race, she refused to call on my daughter.
Wow.
Interesting.
So, you know, here she is in a Christian university where you would not think that that would happen.
Yeah.
And yet she's being oppressed right in her school from a professor because she will not bow down to the ideology.
Well, and that's the opposite for me, because I didn't grow up with like literally anything. My age out, rise up is about age out is what happens when you leave foster care without being adopted. So the short version, when I was 8, I put myself into foster care because of multiple kinds of abuse. I walked into a police station and I said, no more. Put me in foster care. And I lived in 18 homes in 9 years. When I was 18, I went straight off to the, I was lucky enough to make it into a fine arts performing college. and I was given food stamps and 1 month's rent and said, hope you do it. You know, and so I'm exactly what these people want. I'm exactly the kind of person who could say, I have been given the crappy parts of life, you know. But I choose not to. And that's the whole thing. Like, my whole thing is, like, I found my way to happy. You find your way to happy by not focusing on rage. Now, we have this group of people that we are trying to tell them, you are oppressed, or you have oppressed, you know, and they're not, you know, and it's just like, you don't even know oppression. I sit there, you probably sit there, you know, I'm not from the civil rights era. I'm very appreciative that I'm not from the civil rights area. I'm very appreciative that I can marry who I want to. I'm very appreciative that I can go into any restaurant I want, that I can, you know, go into a store usually without being followed. Sometimes you are, you know. So
see, you've had that experience and I never have.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the Black experience is very diverse.
Yeah.
You know,
as diverse as anybody, any other human being.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up age out, rise up. Because see, I should have been in foster care, with the exception that my mother happened to have a twin sister who scooped my sister and I up whenever my mother decided she didn't want to be a mother or couldn't be a mother. And so I had a pretty rough life, but I had some patches where I had love in my life. But for all of my adult life, I actually chose to live in communities where I could go to work and my son could walk to school and I didn't have to worry about him being shot in his back on his way.
Absolutely.
I paid through the nose for rent. There was at one point when I probably paid about 80% of my income. So, you know, we were talking about BLM and how that affects the young people and Antifa.
It just, you know, it's a phase of teenhood for a lot of these kids. It's parties, it's LARPing, it's, you know, guys go out and meet girls at these events. And in the meantime, the damage that they're doing to their souls is just, I mean, and especially feel awful for those African American kids who, when all of this is over, you know, they're going to be Black Lives Matter. They are going to be the ones who are seen, right? Yeah. It's always going to be seen that it was the Black people who did this. Right. Despite the fact that so many of them are, you know, 40-year-old women, teachers.
You know, let me speak to that about the teachers and the 40-year-olds and this whole trend for non-Black people to be in this movement and to actually be virtue signaling. I say that because in your situation, you are a woman of color. You're out holding a sign. And the woman who attacked you might have been another woman of color. But the altercations you had before that were with white women.
Yes, every single one of them.
The interesting thing about that is here they are claiming to care about Black lives when really what they were doing towards you is racist.
Absolutely.
And we see that in the culture right now, where you have white people who are in the faces of Black people shouting obscenities at them, calling them names because they are Black and not following the narrative. That's racism.
Well, even if you take it down to the fact that, like, who constantly thinks about race? Yes. Because guess what? Some of us are too busy living our lives. Some of us are too busy. So if you are the people who constantly think about race, I have people who, whenever a racist thing comes up on the news or whatever, they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah. Why wouldn't I be?" And they're like, "Well, I just saw this thing and it made me think of you."
Well, we're in a hyper-racist society right now. Yeah. And what I believe the church needs to do is love your neighbor. And love God. If we are loving our neighbor and we are loving God, we are pleasing God. And we do not need to chase after the world's ideologies. And we need to stand and speak the truth and be able to tell them why we believe what we believe.
Right.
Yeah. So can you tell our guests how we can reach you? Tell us more about your age out, rise up. I twist that around, but if you could tell us about that, tell us your passion for it, how people can reach you, and something that you would tell a foster kid right now who is about to age out.
Okay. Okay.
That's a lot.
Remember all. Yes. Okay. So I started Age Out Rise Up after we tried to foster, and we realized that just was not the right route for us. And so my passion is I've always wanted to help people live their best lives. You know, whether that is like through organizing or just like life skills or just that mental mindset.
Yeah.
Like, how can I help people live their best lives?
Yes.
And the reason that we tried to adopt is because we were only able to have one child, and motherhood is so very extremely important to me. And so you know, I realized that I'm not going to mother through the foster system. It's just not going to happen. But I know there's so many people out there who don't have a mother, who don't have anyone, you know, and the statistics are abysmal for people who have aged out of care, because one thing, a lot of them are coming from, you know, group homes where they might have been overly medicated, all sorts of things, and they're very lost. And then society tells them, we don't expect much from you.
Yeah, there's that low expectation.
Exactly. That's where it is for me. And so I never ever expected to be talking to anyone about race, because it's not my passion. My passion is this generation of people, multiple generations, who could be who could achieve anything, because they have resilient spirits.
Yes.
You know, and so what I wanted to do was to start I wanted to start a live group like AA, where I would meet with people in the library, and we would have conversations about, like, this is how you fill out a resume, this is how you cook, this is, you know, parenting, all of these sorts of things. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so I started with a podcast, and then I decided, how am I going to get people to listen? Because there's so many things out there. So I started interviewing other former fosters and their experiences. And so I blog about, like, my thoughts and the things that have helped me succeed. You know, and success is defined differently. So I blog. It's everything I do is at Age Out Rise Up. So I blog, and I podcast, and I have a YouTube channel. And my goal is just to help people, really, like, what I say is living well after foster care. It is possible.
Well, we can get behind that.
Yeah.
We can
You are
absolutely
definitely
get
an
behind
encourager,
that.
and you've got the gift of
Yes.
encouragement.
Well,
Yeah.
we
Thanks.
really appreciate you coming on,
Thanks.
sharing your story, and my goodness, we certainly hope there's no more punching in the throat and kicking in the crotch. For goodness sake.
Yeah.
You know, I think about that, and women used to kick, like, assailants in the crotch, not
Right.
each other.
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I
sad.
think it's interesting too that, well, not interesting, but it's essential that we have these kind of discussions,
Yes.
so that we
Yeah.
can
We do.
talk about our experiences. I mean, it's so important to have empathy
Right.
grow in our lives, and that's something that is really missing
Yeah.
in our youth.
Yeah.
Because when we are able to understand, you know, the shoes that you've walked in, we understand that a little bit better, especially if we've done that too. So we have this human connection. And we know that Jesus is all about relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, that's what he's about. And we are not meant to be isolated and alone.
Yeah.
And so your organization, it just gave me goosebumps when I heard you say that you just want to help people. And that's what we want to do at Refine too.
Right.
Just help people. You know, we're just
natural.
moving along in this life as well, and things are difficult and challenging, but we are there for each other.
Well,
Yeah.
we're certainly going to promote Age Out, Rise Up.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
That's great.
Folks, thank you for joining us at the Refine podcast tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
See you then.